Influence: How to Persuade, Convince, and Impact Others with Authority by Jonathan Phoenix. Written by Jonathan Phoenix. Narrated by Alex Lancer. Copyright 2020. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Depression and the Power of Impact. The critical distinction between influence and control makes all of the distinction to positive self-confidence. Life is seldom in our own control. We regret this in different ways as we go throughout our day. Why do I always get the red lights when I leave the house late in the morning? I wish I did not need to work such an ordinary job. I want her to really love me the way I love her. I want a baby so much. Why can't I get pregnant? I don't know what I'll do if the tests show I have cancer. From the minor to the passionately wanted desires we have, it seems so much of our lives are not in our control. This is truth. No individual manages much in life. Nevertheless, we develop a great deal of torment in our own lives by the desire to be in control. The very idea that we should be able to control a circumstance results in feeling powerless. And if a person has depression, this should intensifies a common troublesome thought process of this disorder. Depressed thinking is usually ruminative, repetitive, unsolved thoughts. Plus, when most people are depressed, helplessness is a main theme of their ruminative thinking. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it. Their brooding brains repeat and repeat, till they really believe it totally. Your brain actually believes what you tell it. Okay, that is extremely simplistically mentioned, but brain science demonstrates that when you repeat an idea, the brain acknowledges the repetition and supports it by reinforcing the structure of the neural path you're illuminating. The brain builds more blood supply and provides much faster processing, more glial cell support. With such increased speed, the pathway of thought regarding how defenseless you are becomes a superhighway of helplessness. It gets much easier and simpler to fall into the path of, "there's nothing I can do." When that is a default thought process, depression gets stronger also. It ends up being harder for a person with depression to get rid of the sense that they are ineffective and will not work. Low self-efficacy is a trademark of this disorder. When you want to climb up out of depression, you do have some control, but it is essential to be definitely clear about what control really is. It is so important to make this distinction when the depressed brain is feeling defenseless. We are undoubtedly powerless when we want people, life, God, or the whole universe to give us what we want, and wait to see if we get it. Taking no action to influence others is as unlikely to get us what we want as trying to control others to get it. I talk with people every day in treatment who say things like, "I do every little thing for her. Why will she just not do this thing I want from her?" Meaning, I should be in control of what she gives. The more I give to her, the more she should give to me. Or, how can I convince her or him to remain in school, stop using our charge cards, eat better, stop drinking, gaming, or gambling, pay attention to me, and so forth. Meaning, if I just find the right words, I'll get what I want. He or she will do what I want. The fallacy is, you can control the other individual's behavior by finding the right words or motivation. If any of us were indeed that effective, it would mean we could find a way to be less depressed by applying our control over others. We would actually be effective. But we stay depressed, feeling powerless if others don't comply. Well, we're helpless to control others. So by that definition, we're inefficient, undoubtedly. And that is where the comprehension of influence comes to the rescue. You might not have control, but you do have influence. I use the example of trying to force a baby to sleep. If you have ever been wishing an uneasy baby would sleep, you know the powerless feeling. That small individual can keep you up all night, and you can't control the kid sleeping. Nevertheless, you can influence whether the kid sleeps. You can make sure the kid is fed, dry and warm, and make the environment serene, dark and quiet. Rocking and singing may help influence drowsiness. Which circumstances can you influence, even if you cannot have any control over them? There are a lot of areas in life where your actions make a real difference. You can't force your boss to give you a good evaluation, but you can influence it by the way you do your work. You might be helpless over whether you develop cancer, but you have influence over it by handling diet, stress, direct exposure to chemicals, etc. You cannot force a spouse to want intimacy with you, but you influence intimacy by the generosity, caring, or sexual interest you display. You cannot guarantee an A in class, but you can influence it by the amount you study or put work into an essay. You cannot make a person show up for your birthday party, but you can send out an invitation that makes it seem like fun and send a reminder. You cannot force another person to give you the stats you need to finish your report, but you can send a memo reminding that person you really need their work on deadline. Influence success. Have a fallback. You can influence getting what you want in any situation, including another person, by making plans for how to manage the circumstance if that person does not come through. When you are sad, rigid thinking might trigger the failure to see influence as actual power. That rigidity might firmly insist that you should make things go your way or you have failed. But when you see that you don't have power to control and only power to influence, you will feel better about yourself. It is in your power to use influence over the effects in your life, and once you do, you could get more of what you want. And if you do not get what you want, you can evaluate if it was in your control, most likely not, and if there are other ways to influence the circumstance in the future. Start on the course to self-efficacy today. Do the deeds that can help you get what you want. Decide what you can influence about present circumstance. Assess the actions you are able to take that can make a difference. Exert that influence. For example, make that telephone call, have that conversation, put in the effort. Do not presume failing to get what you want means that your influence was inefficient. It means you did not have complete control of the outcome. State your intent for the next time you are in this circumstance. You will increase your sense of effectiveness and therefore your self-confidence, eliminating the vulnerability of depression. Chapter 2. How to Influence and Persuade with Touch. Beyond making you more attractive, touch can also make a partner more mindful and agreeable too. Read on and learn how to get your partner to say yes with a pat, hug, or rub. Learn to be convincing and prominent with touch. Touching to impact and encourage. Some research studies have found out that touching is prominent and persuasive. Simply put, when you touch other people, they are more likely to accept your demand. Here are some examples. Hornick, 1991, organized student experimenters to randomly touch buyers as they entered a bookshop. A light touch on the arm. Buyers that were touched searched longer in the store, did more shopping, and had a higher general assessment of the store. Similar impacts were found when consumers in a shopping center were asked to take part in a study. Hornick and Ellis, 1988. Consumers who were touched were more likely to accept the study request. They also saw the job as a bit less of a problem than buyers who were not touched. Krusko and Wetzel, 1984, found out that a touch on the hand or shoulder substantially increased clients' tipping. The impact was specifically strong when the touch was fairly inconspicuous. This was dubbed the Midas touch. The influential aspects of touch also include getting things for free. Researchers have shown that bus motorists are more likely to give a passenger an entirely free ride if they touch the driver while making the demand. Touch is certainly convincing and prominent. People who are touched end up being more reasonable, in better moods, and see demands in a more enjoyable light. Touching others makes them want to help, agree, or do as you ask. How to impact with touch. If you want your date or mate to do something, touch them before you ask. Here are several examples. Touch the hand or upper arm of a prospective date as you tell them about a great place you'd like them to go with you for supper. Touch a lover's shoulder or back as you inquire to purchase you a beverage, supper, or a present. Give your mate a quick snuggle and a kiss before you ask to take the garbage out or tackle those unclean dishes. Rub a partner's back before making a gesture to get more intimate. In any case, find an excuse to touch and increase your chances of hearing a yes. Touch while you suggest that second date. Touch when you offer them a drink back at your place. Touch when you want them to make dinner tonight. Touch and get what you want. Touching is influential and convincing, plain and basic. If you do not touch a date, lover, or mate, then they might not be as attentive or acceptable as you'd like. So make sure to rub your lover the proper way. Just find excuses, chances, and ways to touch often as possible. Get comfortable with touch and increase your capability to encourage your lover. Chapter 3. Social impact about risk differs for teens and adults. Life has a lot of dangerous decisions. Some involve physical risks, like crossing the street against the light. Others include social risks, like expressing a viewpoint that varies from those of peers. Still, others include financial risks, like purchasing the stock of a new company. People's conduct in dangerous circumstances depends in part on their beliefs about the potential advantage of the action and the potential risks connected with failure. For some actions, the risks can be drawn from personal experience. Falling off a bike gives you a clear sense of how much it hurts to fall. For others, though, we should find out about the risks from the people around us. A paper by Lisa Knoll, Lucia Maggis Weinberg, Martin Siekenbrink, and Sarah Jane Blakemore in the May of 2015 issue of Mental Science examined how people of different ages are impacted by other people's beliefs about risks. They surveyed over 500 people who went to a science museum in London about a range of moderately risk habits, like cycling without a helmet, eating raw eggs, or crossing a railroad track. The individuals varied in age from 8 to 59. At the start of the study, individuals entered their age. After that, they were shown a product and ranked how dangerous they thought it was. After making their ranking, individuals were revealed what they were told was the typical rating for grown-ups taking the survey, the average ranking for teens taking the survey, or their own rating, which served as a control, and were asked to rank the product again. The pattern of risk ratings was interesting. The kids thought behaviors were more dangerous than any of the other groups. As children got older, their scores of risk decreased through young adulthood. The grown-ups over age 25 thought the behaviors were reasonably risky, though less risky than the youngest kids. If people's scores are influenced by the beliefs of others, then the ranking of risk should change after being shown the risk ratings of a group. The authors were interested in how strongly individuals' beliefs were changed by seeing the ratings of others and the impacts of age on the social influence. Generally, as participants aged, their rankings tended to change less based on the opinions of others. So the youngest individuals, aged 8 to 11, changed the most, while the older grown-ups, 26 and older, changed the least. An interesting analysis was how individuals' beliefs changed depending upon the age whose rankings were shown. Kids, older teenagers, and grown-ups were affected more by the typical scores of grown-ups than by the average scores of teens. The young adolescents, aged 12 to 14, were more influenced by the scores of other teens than by the rankings of adults. What does this mean? There is social influence on beliefs about risk. Many people customize their judgments in the direction of a social standard, though this happens less highly for grown-ups than for kids and teens. Second, many people are more highly affected by judgments of grown-ups than by judgments of teens, except for young adolescents. They are more highly impacted by teens than by adults. Since teens tend to find a set of potentially hazardous behaviors less dangerous than grown-ups do, this suggests that young teens might ultimately be more likely to engage in risky conduct because of the social influence of other teens. To help keep teens from taking part in risky behaviors, it is valuable to find teens who can act as visible positive good examples. Those role models can have a substantial influence on young adolescents who look up to older teens as they start to assert their self-reliance from the adults around them. Chapter 4. How Power Influences Creativity. Power connects to the capability to influence others. People can get power through rising or having important cultural capital, such as knowledge. Power literally alters the way you see the world around you, influencing the way you view and act in the world. Effective people process info more abstractly and flexibly, are less affected by situational hints, take more risks, act more quickly when facing a difficult challenge, behave more in a goal-consistent manner, and are more approach-oriented. Having power frees one from influence from others and causes feelings of safety and security. Since being powerful feels so good, effective people think and act in order to maintain and increase their power. The relationship between power and creativeness could depend, however, on both the stability of the power hierarchy and the potential reward for those exerting creative effort. In an environment with an unsteady power hierarchy, those with low power may become more creative when being creative is conducive to going up the ladder. Effective people, on the other hand, may display the greatest creative skill levels under conditions where creative skill allows them to maintain or increase their power. This is precisely what a current research study carried out by Daniel Slichter and his associates found. Individuals were told that they would take part in a task in which they needed to work with another individual. Participants were told that the higher power individual would supervise the division of labor, display development, and evaluate performance of the low power person after completion of the task, and that the benefits of the low-power person would be based upon this assessment. Individuals were then randomly appointed to a position of power or a position of subordinance. They were also randomly appointed to a stable power condition or an unstable power condition. In the stable power condition, individuals were told that power positions were randomly appointed and power positions would stay unchanged. In the unsteady power condition, the individuals were told that the power positions might be switched at some point throughout the experience. Before participating in the group job, subjects took a test of creative skill and were told either that the test was relevant to efficient functioning in a high power position or it was not. When power was steady, high power people were more creative than lower power people. The effects were specifically noticeable when creativeness related to maintaining power. When power was unsteady, however, the pattern was reversed. Low-power individuals were more flexible thinkers, were less avoidant, and had an international attentional focus compared to higher-power individuals, specifically when performance pertained to accomplishing power. This international attentional focus, in turn, caused high creativity. This research suggests that when we give people the possibility to get power, they will show a boost in creativeness if we make it explicit that there is a reason to be more creative. That works best in unstable power hierarchies, where it is clear that there isn't just one dominant force, and everyone else is doomed to a life of subservience. As the scientists keep in mind, for low-power individuals, power instability is empowering, leading them to act and behave as high-power individuals. Having unsteady low power causes feelings of self-confidence and self-efficacy, specifically when low-power individuals can get power by being creative. They could be more confident about their capabilities and also view that they have the power to change their circumstance. The way most organizations and schools are currently structured in the United States, where those not in power are pressured to follow instructions from managers or teachers, and creative skill is not valued or revealed to be pertinent to getting power, is not enabling us to reach our maximum creative potential as a nation. Educators and company managers may want to rethink how they structure their environment to keep people motivated. The risk with power hierarchies is that they are self-reinforcing. Effective people are more likely to act forcefully and with confidence, take more risks, show more creative skill, use dogma more frequently, such as stereotyping and legitimizing myths, and choose jobs that forward their own interests. And all of these behaviors allow powerful people to acquire a lot more resources and influence. Brought to the severe, power hierarchies can lead to an environment where everyone else is left feeling powerless. The important question is whether this sort of winner-takes-all environment draws out the best in the majority of people. The research is clear that it does not. As for how to inspire creativeness in everybody, which includes leaders, it might be possible to create structures where those in power feel as though their creative skill will allow them to maintain their position, while at the same time enabling those not in power to feel like they too can eventually gain power through their creativity. There may be various ways to execute such a system, but nevertheless it is done. The scientists make one thing clear. When the power hierarchy is unstable, those lacking power hold the power to creativeness. Chapter 5. The Top 30 Affecting Words. Much has been written on the art of influence, but lots of my clients find such advice too difficult to execute. They've had more success in trying to influence someone's behavior or attitude by, where proper, using the following 32 words. Questions tend to be more potent change agents than our statements, so for each word I provide a question that uses it. Just because this is psychology today, most of the questions are those that a helping professional may ask clients, or that an individual might ask a good friend. In each sentence, I highlight a word when it's one of the 32. Also, beware of these words being used to control you, for example, in marketing, specifically political ads and commercials. You. What do you want? What do you truly want? Imagine. Envision you did not care what anybody thought. What would you do? Practical. What can I do to be practical? Care. At this time, do you want to take better care of yourself, or do you have other concerns? Smart. I am wondering if this technique might be clever. What do you think? Wise. What would the wise person within you do in this situation? Special. We all want to feel unique. Is there anything you're doing to be unique that you might want to do more of? Comfort. I am wondering whether if you cut back your spending, you'd have more peace of mind. What do you think? Control. With our complicated lives, it's simple to feel out of control. May there be some infant step that would help you restore a little bit of control. Easier. I've found this method to be easier. Might that work for you? Love. At this point, how much do you care about being loved? By whom? Unearth. Do you think it's worth the effort to uncover a much better apartment or condo? Motivation. I find inspiration in bios of people like Albert Ellis, Anne Frank, and Jonas Salk. What motivates you? Hope. Everybody needs hope. I know someone with end-stage cancer whose hope lies in teaching life lessons to his children and grandchildren that come to visit him. Anything might give you hope. New. Is there anything that's new you're thinking about nowadays? Safeguard. Nowadays, what do you most care to safeguard yourself against? Health. Our physical and mental health can feel fragile. Is there any element of your health that you're thinking of? Safe. Where and when do you feel safe? Really comfortable? Forward. What's a baby step you could require to move on? Change. There was a time I finally felt all set to change, for a clean slate. How about you? Proven. Few things are even proven, but the prevalence of the evidence appears to support your attempting to exercise frequently and to stay busy before trying an antidepressant. What do you think? Stand. Is there anything you deeply believe in that you find hard to take a stand about? Risky. That treatment is so experimental and its risk-reward ratio appears poor. But what do you think? Free. As we are starting this group practice and thinking of our startup expenditures, we should always think, how can we get this for free? Maybe a church school has empty classrooms they may let us have for free, or at least at really low cost. What do you think? Now. If we do it now, we can stay away from the guilt of procrastination. I know it's a pain, but what do you think? Options. It would appear you have 3 choices, A, B, and C. Which do you think is wisest? Less powerful impacting words. Many of the following words were and sometimes still are considered to be good affecting words, but they may be fading in utility. As pointed out, the words I, win, winner, contend, and even success now conflict with America's zeitgeist: less hierarchy, less competitive, more collaborative, inclusive, redistributive to society's have-nots. The following words are, especially amongst informed people, falling out of favor because they are typically viewed as buzz: instant, quick, remarkable, incredible, wonderful, secret. Unfortunately, no matter how typically and how appropriately we use the 30 words above, there are no immediate secrets that are pretty quick, amazing, and downright great and incredible. But I'm hoping you will find them handy. Chapter 6. Influence without authority. How can you boost your influence in the work environment? In the present financial chaos, just one thing has become clear. In an environment of cutbacks, downsizing, and restructuring, official lines of authority and accountability have been seriously disrupted and blurred. Therefore, it is more important than ever to build your capability to influence without authority, since the people on whose efforts your success depends might not report to you or even to anybody. So, what are some best practices of cultivating your ability to influence others, to be cooperative and collective when you don't straight and even indirectly supervise them? In my experience, here are some strategies that work. Get out of your way to assist others. If you are deemed a person who volunteers to do extra work to be helpful to your associates, they are a lot more likely to be motivated to return the favor. Norms of reciprocity have been a universal in human history across civilizations and societies, and even in other species like primates and bats. Be transparent about your motivations and over-communicate. Let others know that what you are asking them to do is in the organization's benefit, not just in your best interest. Because of that, make it clear that collaborating can accrue to everyone's advantage. Share credit with others. One of the most convenient ways to eliminate anybody's interest in or inspiration to assist you by expending discretionary effort is to struggle to give credit to others for their contributions or accomplishments, or to unduly blame others when things go wrong. The more credit you share, the more you will encourage others to work with you, to share the benefits of whatever you achieve together. Do not pull rank. One of the worst things you can do in a circumstance in which you lack authority is to try to pretend that you have authority. Your co-workers will resent your attempting to misrepresent yourself and your role vis-à-vis their roles, and will probably try to undermine your efforts. I look forward to hearing from all of you. What have you seen people do in the current environment that has either enhanced or limited their ability to influence others? Chapter 7. Which has greater impact, influence or attention? When we think of really world-class attention getters, why do Americans appear to come to mind initially? Is this a cultural skill? Americans really do stand out at home entertainment and advertising. Those fields show the art of attention-getting brought to an expert level. Probably, remarkable marketing skills are very much the structure of a consumerist economy. How else can customers be encouraged to purchase more products and services, whether need exists or not? Creating the perception of need and desirability is definitely enough of an objective. In a word, attention equates to seduction. Is it any surprise that allure is a specifically reliable and heavily emphasized tool in advertising by American films? Isn't this the ultimate metaphor of desirability? We use the exact same vocabulary: instant satisfaction, satiation, appetite, enthusiasm, etc. There can be no doubt that this approach works. But what does that mean about us when we respond? We actually deify, i.e., ascribe godlike virtues to, our most well-known celebs. They are instantly recognizable in any framework other than their personal reality when removed of makeup and expensive outfits. Why do we feel such satisfaction when we spot these rare beings? How has our attention become so powerfully attracted to them? Is this an essential human need that's especially strong in American culture? Could a P.T. Barnum, 1801 to 1891, have existed in any other culture? What attributes of American society encouraged and supported his skills? Regardless of his fantastic business instincts and success, Barnum definitely had his detractors. Some critics called him a huckster, a sensationalist manipulator, even a dishonest scam. Such is the life of an aggressive entrepreneur who determines how to sell enjoyment built on the perception of extreme and rare novelty. How many MBA students have studied his techniques to comprehend how he attained his success? By the way, after a troubled life of up and down cycles, he served 2 terms as a member of your Home of Representatives and was mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, later in life. Throughout his diverse undertakings, he was always a performer first. Maybe the most fitting epitaph for him would originate from his own words: "I am a showman by occupation, and all of the gilding shall make nothing else of me." How much did his life, all his craziness, influence the lives of others, even decades later? What do you think when you assess his enduring tradition, i.e., influence? When does attention translate to influence? How many different sorts of attention are there? How do we react differently to different types of stimuli? Shock and fear come to mind as 2 stimuli that have universal and immediate impact on people of all cultures. When seeing photos of the detonation of an atomic bomb over Japan, who fails to sense the enormity of the destructive power and the unimaginable death and destruction of property that resulted? What about a dreadful multi-vehicle crash of mangled bodies and twisted steel braided in fatal flames? Fast forward to today's internet, which makes it possible for social media and instant connectivity and free worldwide access to actually billions of people. Anybody and everybody can compete for our attention, basically at no or really low cost. In this context, why are we shocked that we feel significantly stressed by information overload and attention depletion? But has our craving for attention-generating stimuli decreased? What beliefs underlie and develop the chance for popular television and film stars to acquire considerable financial and political power, i.e., influence? Appeal means name recognition and having a fan base willing to ascribe superhuman abilities, i.e., knowledge, insight, and capabilities to these people Without needing any concrete proof or evidence, what does this phenomenon mean about our individual and social values? How are we translating the influence we feel in reaction to these stimuli? Now we have created a new class of public relations professionals called influencers, who are experts and specialize in monetizing social networks interactions. Some are as young as 7 years of age and can earn countless dollars in annual income. What a true miracle! What does this say about how our economy works? Isn't this the most extreme example of how attention can be converted to the power of influence? Is this only possible in marketing and advertising, where the connection of attention and influence is so direct? Impact, in the form of inspiration, on the other hand, can take years before concrete and useful outcomes are realized. Perhaps this is because motivation is actually a time-independent, multidimensional stimulus, impacting the intellect and the spirit as well as the feelings. Isn't the effect of attention mainly on the feelings? Consider role models who have been spiritual and thought leaders throughout countless years of human history. Maybe one of the most important distinctions between them and our modern stars is that those leaders wanted to draw our attention to their ideas and beliefs, while the appeal of celebrities is based upon our perception of who they are as people, or who they represent in films and TV. The critical distinction is intention. When a leader means to influence his or her followers, attention is only the first and easiest step in making a connection. Attention helps initiate, but influence will be the consequence of a connection being perceived as significant and substantial. The original objective must resonate with the values of the followers. Leaders are described by how their followers react. Impact requires time and effort to digest and end up being actionable. Maybe attention is just the most immediate and most short-lived example of influence. Impact indicates that the thoughts and/or conduct of the recipient are impacted and possibly modified by as low as the intro of a new information point that needs to be considered. What is more vital to you, influence or attention? Chapter 8. Subliminal Ads, Unconscious Influence and Consumption. The idea that we can be impacted by ads we do not purposefully detect is just one of the most intriguing in customer psychology and has attracted a lot of attention throughout the years. Since the 1950s, people have feared that words or images briefly flashed on a screen or concealed in an advertisement have the power to make us buy certain items and even choose a specific political candidate. Are these fears founded, or is this more myth than reality? The answer, really believe it or not, is yes and no. While there are widely held false beliefs about subliminal marketing, it can influence us. In this post, I'm going to clarify this seeming contradiction, beginning with a discussion of what subliminal marketing is and the origin of common beliefs surrounding it, and after that ending up with a conversation of when it actually does influence us. After reading this, you may begin to look at the ice in that alcohol advertisement a little differently. Subliminal advertising is that making use of words or pictures, referred to as stimuli, we do not knowingly discover. Those stimuli can be undetectable because they are hidden inside of some other image, or in other words, hiding the word sex in some ice in a liquor ad, or simply because they're presented on a screen so briefly we're not mindful we're seeing them. How briefly does something have to be presented to be undetected? The oft-agreed period is 0.003 seconds. That's 3/1000th of a second. Most people will not be consciously conscious they've seen a stimuli that was revealed for 0.003 seconds, regardless, though, of whether a stimulus is considered subliminal simply because it's hidden in something else, or because it exists really quickly. The differentiating function is that we're not conscious, we're taking a look at it. When subliminal stimuli use an impact on us, it is said to be an unconscious influence, meaning it's an impact we are not purposefully familiar with. Distaste for subliminal advertising started in 1957 after James Vickery and Francis Thayer released a research study in which they said that subliminally providing the words "eat popcorn" and "drink Coca-Cola" in a film increased popcorn sales by 58% and Coca-Cola sales by 18%. Those are undoubtedly big sales increases, thinking about all Vickery and Thayer said to have been accomplished with a few words on a screen. The following year, a man called Vance Packard released a book called The Hidden Persuaders, in which he talked about how advertisers could control customers by appealing to their unconscious desires. Undoubtedly, Packard's claims of a marketer's capability to influence customers were comparable to a puppet master pulling a puppet's strings. After finding out about Vickery and Thayer's research study and reading Packard's book, people feared marketers could use subliminal marketing to force them to buy items, and politicians could even use subliminal marketing to force them to vote a particular way. Individuals also feared skepticism and suspicion would be pointless against this form of influence, simply because, after all, we cannot be suspicious of something we are not even mindful we've seen. The fear of subliminal marketing was mostly unproven, though, as Packard greatly overemphasized advertisers' power over consumers, and Vickery and Thayer fabricated their information. That's right. They just made it all up for no other reason than to promote Vickery's own marketing company. In addition, legitimate research, or research that did not make use of produced information, carried out after the publication of Vickery and Thayer's research study, found extremely little proof that subliminal marketing applied any influence on people. Despite of this, though, the myth that subliminal marketing has an effective influence endures. Recent survey information revealed over 3/4 of respondents knew of subliminal marketing, and practically half felt susceptible to it. If the fear of subliminal marketing is mostly unfounded, this begs the question, can we ever be impacted outside awareness? The answer, actually, is yes. Research showed that when words relating to thirst were subliminally presented to thirsty people, they later drank more. This despite the fact that these people didn't report being thirstier. This indicates these people were not only uninformed of seeing the thirst-related words, but were also uninformed of the words' influence on their conduct. Other research revealed stimuli people were aware of could use an impact on their conduct they were not aware of. An example could be this. Research showed that alcohol store clients purchased more German white wine when German music was playing in the store, and more Italian white wine when Italian music was playing in the store. When asked what led them to choose the wine they chose, only a few patrons pointed out the music, implying that, regardless of the fact they could hear the music, most of them were unaware it was affecting their behavior. Other research revealed that people who watched somebody eating ice cream before being given the chance to eat ice cream themselves would unconsciously eat the exact same amount of ice cream as that other individual. So, plainly then, our consumption can be impacted without our awareness, be it because of direct exposure to stimuli we do not spot, or stimuli we do spot, but which influence us outside awareness. At this point, I would like to address a question that may have occurred to the reader. What's the distinction between the formerly discussed older research that showed no real proof people could be affected by subliminal marketing, and more current research that revealed we can be affected outside awareness? There are two distinctions, the first of which is that psychologists are now aware that, to be effective, subliminal stimuli must appeal to existing needs and goals. For instance, subliminally providing thirst-related words led people to drink more when they were already thirsty. Second, psychologists are now aware that when it comes to stimuli we understand, but which influence us outside awareness, we should not be aware the stimuli are applying an influence on us. For example, if the liquor store customers hearing the Italian music were told ahead of time that the music would lead them to purchase Italian white wine, a lot of them probably would have chosen red wine of a very different beginning, if any. Additionally, if the people who imitated another person when eating ice cream were told in advance that they'd copy that person's eating conduct, they most likely wouldn't have done so. While an unexpected number of people today still sign up for the idea that subliminal advertising can make us do things against our will, that is mostly just a misconception. Research has shown that subliminal ads and other stimuli developed to influence us outside awareness can do so, but not really strongly. I mean, there's a huge difference between getting thirsty people to drink a drink offered to them and making some probably well-hydrated moviegoers purchase Coke. With that said, subliminal stimuli and knowingly detectable stimuli could influence our behavior without our knowledge when they are used right. For instance, one purpose of playing upbeat music in restaurants is to make us eat much faster and increase the restaurant's turnover rate, and by extension, its revenues. Lots of us have not a single clue the music is influencing our eating, and the restaurant staff, who are aware, would never tell us. There are some messages from all the following. First, you needn't be concerned that ads hidden in films and television programs are making you purchase things, because at most they could only get you to purchase something you'd be inclined to purchase anyway, if they could even exert that much influence. Second, addressing your environments might decrease the influence of detectable yet inconspicuous stimuli that could otherwise apply an unknown influence on your conduct. This has been Influence: How to Persuade, Convince, and Impact Others with Authority, written by Jonathan Phoenix, narrated by Alex Lancer, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Influence: The Science Behind Leadership and Creating Followers, written by Jonathan Phoenix, narrated by Alex Lancer, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Chapter 1: The Science Behind Why People Follow the Crowd. It could seem that we are in control of our thoughts and behavior. However, social psychology tells a completely different story. Social psychology is specified as the scientific research of how we think of, influence, and connect to one another. As humans, we are social beings. Lots of us communicate with others each day, spending large portions of our waking hours in some form of communication. One lesson from social psychology is the influence others have on us. Research shows we do not have as much power over our thoughts and behavior as we think. We take cues from our environment, specifically others, on how to act. How groups influence us. Consider the concept of group polarization. The idea is that like-minded people in a group enhance one another's perspectives. Group polarization reinforces the viewpoints of everyone in the group. In a study by French psychologists Serge Moscovici and Marissa Zavalloni, researchers asked individuals some questions. First and foremost, scientists inquired about their opinion of the French president. Second, they asked about their mindset toward Americans. The scientists then asked the participants to talk about each subject as a group. After a conversation, groups who held a tentative agreement ended up being more extreme in their viewpoints. For example, participants held somewhat favorable attitudes toward the French president, but their attitudes amplified as group members consulted with one another. They held slightly lack of confidences to Americans, but their mindsets heightened as each member learned others shared their views about their allies abroad. The researchers concluded, group agreement appears to induce a real change of mindsets, in which subjects are very likely to adopt more severe positions. When we see our unsure opinions showed back to us, our beliefs reinforce. Lots of us also enjoy being with others who share comparable beliefs. In one experiment, researchers welcomed people to go over concerns including same-sex marriage, affirmative action, and environment change. People in one group originated from predominantly liberal Boulder, Colorado. People in another group came from mainly conservative Colorado Springs. The conversations on controversial topics resulted in increased contact within the groups. Beliefs we hold are reinforced when we are around others who hold similar beliefs. If other individuals do it, that means it's right, right? There is a heuristic the majority of us use to decide on what to do, think, say, and purchase. The principle of social proof. To discover what's correct, we look at what other individuals are doing. In his successful book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, psychologist Robert Cialdini writes, "Whether the question is what to do with an empty popcorn box in a cinema, how quick to drive on a particular stretch of highway, or how to eat the chicken at a supper party, the actions of those around us will be essential in specifying the answer. Social proof is a shortcut to decide how to act." Cialdini has used the principle of social proof to prevent environmental theft. Consider the case of Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park. Visitors would come to the park and learn of past thievery from prominent signs. Your heritage is being vandalized each day by theft losses of petrified wood of 14 heaps a year, mainly a little piece at a time. In one experiment, Cialdini eliminated the indication from a particular path in the park to gauge any distinctions it might make. The course without any sign had 1/3 less theft than the path with the indication. Visitors translated the indication's message as approval. Put in a different way, visitors thought it was normal to take little pieces of wood simply because so much was stolen each year. Researchers have also used the concept of social evidence to help people conquer their fears. In one study, Albert Bandura and his associates dealt with a group of young children terrified of dogs. The children watched a 4-year-old boy happily play with the dog for 20 minutes a day for 4 days. After the 4-day period, 67% of the children who watched the boy play with the dog were willing to get in a playpen with the dog. When the researchers carried out a follow-up research study 1 month later, they found the exact same kids wanted to play with a pet dog. Watching a little boy have a good time with the dog lowered fear in children. They used the behavior of a young boy playing with a dog as a model to change their own behavior. Why do others influence us so much? Clearly, others impact our behavior. One reason for this is that we live in an intricate world. We use the choices of others as a heuristic or mental shortcut to navigate our lives. English philosopher and mathematician Alfred North Whitehead once said, "Civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can perform without thinking of them." In his book Influence, Cialdini uses the example of marketers informing us that a product is the fastest growing or best selling. Advertisers don't need to convince us that an item is good. They only really need to say, "Others think so." Cialdini notes that consumers typically use an easy heuristic. Popular is good. Following the crowd permits us to work in a complicated environment. Lots of us do not have time to increase our knowledge of all merchandise and research each marketed item to gauge its usefulness. Instead, we depend on signals like popularity. If everyone else is buying something, the thinking goes, there is a likelihood the item is definitely worth our attention. A second reason others influence us is that human beings are social. We have endured just because of our ability to band together. Early people who formed groups were more likely to survive. This affected our psychology. As Julia Coultas, a scientist at the University of Essex, puts it, for an individual signing up with a group, copying the conduct of the bulk would then be a reasonable adaptive behavior. A conformist propensity would facilitate acceptance into the group, and would most likely lead to survival if it included the choice, for instance, to choose between a healthy or dangerous food based upon copying the behavior of the majority. In our evolutionary past, our forefathers were under constant threat. Eager consciousness of others helped our forefathers survive in a hazardous and unpredictable world. Modern human beings have inherited such adaptive habits. These behaviors include banding together and promoting social harmony. This includes not dissenting from the group. In a hunter-gatherer group, being ostracized or banished could have been a death sentence. Thoughtful reflection on social influence might lead us to a higher consciousness of ourselves and our relationships with others. Chapter 2. Friends have more say in your relationships than you think. We all manage several relationships, sisters or brothers, friends, romantic partners. But what happens when we start to feel pressure from these competing relationships? Many psychologists worry about the prominent effect that peer pressure has on our relationships. This pressure can influence who we date and how long we date. The most prominent people in our lives can be our family and friends, those whom we rely on the most. We often look to them for advice and approval of our relationships. So it isn't surprising that these people can have a huge influence on our relationships. So, what is peer pressure? A lot of us, at some time in our lives, have experienced what peer pressure feels a bit like. Whether it is when your friends encouraged you to ask someone out, or even if your family lovingly pushed you to go for a job that was a great opportunity. But exactly what is peer pressure? Peer pressure is when people in your social circle push you to do something or stop you from doing something, even if that isn't precisely what you wanted to do. For more youthful adolescents, peer pressure is especially strong. As teenagers first method dating, they typically see potential romantic partners concerning the amount of social status they can provide. Teenagers' choices about who to date are very much impacted by what they think their good friends will think, and if the partner will be seen as acceptable by their good friends. How is peer pressure applied? Peers impact us in a variety of ways. It can be as direct as a friend telling you to do something, or as subtle as everyone around you dressing or looking a particular way. This is also true for peers' influence on our romantic relationships. In one research study, scientists realized that the factor most related to when adolescents started dating was their real age, not when they hit puberty. How does this finding show peer impacts? Usually, interest in sex accompanies adolescence, so if adolescents' interest in dating tracked their growing sexuality, they should begin dating around puberty, whether they hit puberty early or late for their age. However, this is not what happens. Rather, adolescents start dating when the majority of their peers show an interest in dating. So for early bloomers, that means entering the dating scene later, and for late bloomers, it means starting to date before their bodies are sending them the signals that it's time. That suggests that the main reason teenagers start dating is that they see their good friends doing it. Peers can also influence sexual activity. Research has revealed that teenagers are more likely to take part in sex if they actually believe their good friends have liberal attitudes towards sex. Teens are more likely to have casual sex if they think their peers approve of such activity. College students on spring break trips are more likely to suggest a desire to hook up if they think that is the norm amongst their peers. Yet, people might not be aware of just how much their peers are affecting them. In a study where teen girls were asked about when and why they first ended up being sexually active, the majority of the girls said peer pressure had nothing to do with their choice. though when asked to explain in their own words why they chose to take part in sexual activity, they described something they could not name affecting their choice. That suggests that teenage girls might internalize peer pressure to the point where it is affecting their choices without them even seeing it. These impacts can be extremely subtle. An example could be this. In one research study, participants were asked to rate faces on appearance. Without understanding what anyone else had ranked, individuals were found to be in agreement on what they perceived as attractive when compared with people they were close to, who were beyond the research study. That is, people tended to agree with their good friends about who was the most appealing. These results are considerable because they show that those closest to an individual may impact who they're most attracted to. How much do our friends influence relationships? So, we've seen that our peer group can influence when we start dating or engage in sex, or who we choose to chase after. However, our friends' influence on our intimate relationships extends past those initial stages. Researchers have learned that even if we are satisfied with our relationships, our love is significantly affected by our friends' disapproval. One reason this occurs is that our friends are more dispassionate about our romances than we are. They condemn our relationships if they view us to be less happy than we should be. Additionally, our good friends' judgments could potentially be more valid than our own, just because we can be prejudiced by our own thoughts and feelings about our relationship. An example could be this. It is very common to be really infatuated with the individual you start dating, making it hard to see that individual's negative characteristics. Having said that, your good friend, who is not being blinded by love like you are, can see these negative elements of your relationship. Greater friend support is associated with higher dedication, satisfaction, and investments in relationships. Moreover, you are less likely to think you would be better off dating somebody else if you have greater friend support. Furthermore, it has been revealed that members of your social network, whether it be friends and family, directly influence your relationships by displaying either positive or negative reactions to them. This is an example. A good friend might act very disrespectful when they are around your partner whom they dislike because they know they have an influence. All of this research taken together shows that clearly there is a relationship between friend approval and relationship success. Who is likely to be influenced by peer pressure? Naturally, not everyone is similarly influenced by peer pressure. There are those who have a much easier time withstanding the impacts of their friends than others. People that show certain personality characteristics, like low self-determination and low self-esteem, may be more susceptible to the influence of good friends on their relationship. If you think about it, your first real relationship outside of your family is friendship. When exploring other types of relationships, in this case romantic, it is very likely that you would look to your very first friendship for guidance in this unknown area. Friendships help shape you as a person. If you have good friends who are less than real with you, you're going to search for somebody trustworthy who will be truthful with you. Friendship helps teenagers with low self-determination in modification. This insinuates a closer bond between good friends simply because of the preliminary dependence on this relationship in such a crucial time in development. When a person has low self-determination, it means they are constantly unsure of themselves. People that are like this would fall easily under peer pressure. Peers are specifically prominent throughout adolescence, when we are far more very likely to listen to our friends just because of the bond we share with them. In a variety of contexts, the ones with lower self-confidence are more vulnerable to peer pressure. That is also likely to apply to how their friends influence their relationships as well. That could be positive if your friends actually have your best interests at heart and properly understand your relationship. Nonetheless, if your dating choices are impacted by how they'll affect your social status, then an over-reliance on peer approval is likely to cause bad choices. Chapter 3. Consumer behavior. What impacts consumer behavior? Consumer conduct, on how people buy and use goods and services, is a wealthy field of psychological research, particularly for firms trying to sell products to as many potential customers as possible. Since what people buy and why they purchase it affects various facets of their lives, research into consumer behavior ties together some essential psychological issues. These include communication. How do different people react to advertising and marketing? Identity. Do our purchases reveal our character? Social status, decision-making, and mental and physical health. Corporations, political campaigns, and non-profit companies all seek advice from discoveries about customer conduct to determine how best to market products, candidates, or concerns. In many cases, they achieve this by manipulating individuals' fears, their least healthy routines, or their worst propensities. But customers aren't helpless. Learning more about the different methods companies employ, and also the clarifications for individuals' typically confusing getting choices, can help people more knowingly decide what, why, and whether to buy. How advertising and marketing work. Two large interrelated markets, advertising and marketing, are dedicated to introducing people to items and persuading them to make purchases. The general public's desires tend to change with time. However, what works in one product's project will not always work in another's. To adapt messages for an unpredictable audience, marketers employ focus groups, market research, and mental research studies to better comprehend what forces people to commit to purchases or end up being devoted to brand names. Everyone has heard the advertising maxim, "sex sells," for example, but exactly what, when, and why sex can be used to effectively market a product is the subject of much dispute among ad makers and behavior researchers. A little while ago, some proof has suggested that pitches to the perceived most affordable common denominator could actually influence customer reaction. Why do we purchase things we do not need? Much of what people purchase, like food, shelter, or treatment, is needed for their health and security. But what obliges somebody to buy things that aren't necessary, like the current iPhone or an unwise set of high-heeled shoes? Extraneous purchases might be driven by a need to display a person's social status or in reaction to an emotion like unhappiness or monotony. In other circumstances, merchants might effectively manipulate the desire for a bargain by making an unwanted product seem especially affordable or depicting it as being in limited supply. In capitalist societies, people will continue to be lured by unnecessary products and services. Learning how to recognize common control tactics could help people and families save cash and tension in the long term. Chapter 4. Become an influencer. Non-ADHD partners usually ask me how to move away from the parenting role they are in while still getting their concerns heard and needs met. This quote helps clarify why I suggest that they step away from being in charge and determining how things should or will go, and instead think of themselves as influencers. Not only does making requests versus telling or directing show respect and communicate to your spouse that you wish to be partners, gradually it also strengthens your position in the relationship. Requests are simpler to hear and think about, and not as likely to be reacted to with defensiveness by your partner. With time, as your relationship rebalances and your partner becomes more open to your requests, they are also more likely to be adopted, or at least talked about and considered. It's appealing to take over and be in charge when your partner has ADHD, saying, "This is what we are doing," because you are faced frequently with the inconsistency that ADHD adds. Your partner assures to do something, then doesn't plan properly, or misestimates the time it will take. You thought you were in agreement on how to solve a problem, and then it turns out your partner didn't actually concur, and absolutely nothing moves ahead. There are a lot more circumstances. You probably recognize them. But though it's tempting to take over, it's hurtful to the relationship, as it puts you in that parent-child dynamic death spiral. Being an influencer instead of the family authority takes time and patience, but is quite essential for the general health of your relationship and for getting what you want from your partner. Here are some ideas for how to move from imposing solutions on your partner to impacting the outcome of your interactions. First and foremost, do all you can so that both of you vacate the over-functioning parent role, non-ADHD partner, and out of the under-functioning child role, ADHD partner. For ADHD partners, this means really owning and handling the ADHD. Use the power of interest. When you ask your partner questions about his or her positions or ideas, you could learn something that opens a new course based on both your needs. Besides, your partner will be pleased with the attention and more open to what you are talking about. Brainstorm possible approaches instead of instantly attempting to solve a problem. You are going to have more choices from which to choose. Stay calm as you speak, and remember to begin with a demand rather than a criticism. Make sure you have your partner's full attention before speaking. This is especially crucial when ADHD is in the mix. Search for patterns and talk about those, rather than fixating on individual events. Your partner will be less defensive, and for this reason, simpler to influence. For example, "I've truly been missing you nowadays. How about heading out on a date Friday?" Works better to get some connection time together than "You didn't schedule that date you promised to put together." Before you speak, let your partner know if you're just wishing to talk out loud rather than looking for a resolution. Both parties will feel less disappointed if this is clear at the beginning of a conversation. Make certain that you both recognize and acknowledge great. Do not let anger keep you from being positive. As Dempsey notes, options enforced seldom last, but I'm thinking you've already experienced that. Chapter 5. What every leader should know about trust and impact. Perhaps the opening expression of the Edelman Trust Barometer 2016 records it best. "There is deeply disturbing news," it reads. Their annual survey involving 33,000 respondents in 28 countries found the trust of the mass population can no longer be drawn from granted, and any continuation of the grand illusion is very risky for leaders in today's world. That grand impression refers to an existing belief that people will automatically follow or trust those with title or authority. No more. Consider these Edelman results. Trust is rising up in the elite or informed public group, those with at the very least a college education who are very participated in media and have some earnings in the top 25%. Having said that, in the mass population, the remaining 85% of our sample, trust levels have hardly budged since the Great Recession. Risking income inequality, prominent discoveries, or greed and wrongdoing, and the democratization of media have turned the traditional pyramid of influence. The net outcome is a new phenomenon, where the most influential segment of the population is at the same time the least trusting. No country presents a bigger divide than the US, with an almost 20-point gap between the trusting notified publics and wondering about mass population. Today is not the CEO or a federal government official who is the most prominent or most trustworthy, but an individual like yourself or an average employee. These most dependable and influential stakeholders in an organization, staff members, are also the least likely to trust their own company. As Edelman puts it, inequality of trust and salary have essential effects. This is now one of those effects. The bottom line is the following. Individuals do not give ideas, discretionary efforts, passion, followership, or their best work to people they don't trust. Here are 5 things each leader should know about trust and influence times. Trust is the new workplace currency. What companies need to ensure development, innovation, and sustainability can no longer be bought with just a paycheck. Trust doesn't come with a title. Trust is built through everyday actions, the positioning of what leaders say and what they do. Engagement and innovation need trust. Trust does not cause engagement or innovation, but it enables them. An engagement issue is a trust issue. Trust begets trust. If you want people to appear and do great work, you really need to create a civilization sustained by trust. As a leader, to get trust, you must give it. Think regional. People work for people, not for businesses. For the people who work for you, trust is about you. In this redefined pyramid of influence and trust, effective leaders who consistently deliver great results will be those that know how to develop and nurture a society of trust. Chapter 6. The Top 7 Leadership Errors That Diminish Your Influence. Many leaders undervalue their influence over others. This leads to underperforming groups. The bright side is that some micro-initiatives can develop a macro impact in regard to efficiency, so there's lots of room to grow efficiency. There are emotional intelligence strategies, pointers, and tools that help move people into the top 10%. Who wouldn't want to be in the leading 10%? Research by Zenger and Folkman in The Remarkable Leader states that once in the top 10%, the individuals are twice as important to the bottom line as somebody in 89% and right below. When I talk to groups about leadership, everyone knows who that top 10% performer is on their team. Yet, they don't know how to get more of their direct reports into the top %. There are some key fundamental errors for these leaders. Not only is there a gap in developing more leaders, we're experiencing a brain drain in massive proportions, resulting in an assembling mayhem just because of 3 aspects. Today, 40% of companies are specifying they will be experiencing a significant gap in number of skilled leaders trained. The 3 issue elements are: America has lost 8 million jobs in the last 2 years because of the Great Recession. Retiring baby boomers are leaving a shortfall of 10 million workers. Gen X and Y going into management roles have lower emotional intelligence, or EI. That is critical because EI, not IQ or technical know-how, has been determined as the key element for putting some in the top 10% of performance. The good news is that your EI improves with age. It is part of growing. The resolution: organizations need more good leaders. Good leaders enhance engagement. Higher engagement equates to higher organizational performance. Leaders really need emotional intelligence to move into the top 10%. So, why are so many leaders and organizations underperforming? These 7 mistakes are unintended, yet impactful. How many do you find hold true for you or your emerging leader? 1. Generalization of skill error. Leaders are promoted for reasons aside from leadership, either technical skills or being a pretty good individual performer. Quote, "You can manage yourself. Because of this, you will know how to manage others." This error can leave new managers and leaders unprepared and set up for failure, as a new set of abilities is required to be an effective leader. Management requires a whole new set of skills to be effective. True for you or others? 2. Spotlight error. Leaders are under the spotlight 24/7. Every action is inspected, examined, or analyzed more so than leaders recognize. Most leaders' reliability has been fallen apart with an off-the-cuff communication or reactive response. True for you or others? 3. Influence error. Followers want to please the leader and are waiting to be acknowledged for their development and unique abilities. Every day, leaders miss out on chances to enhance their influence with followers. Usually, leaders ignore or really appreciate just how much power and influence they actually have. True for you or others? 4. Overlook mistake. The jobs of management are often regulated or discarded in favor of the dilemma or hot issue of the day. The basic management functions of giving direction, feedback, delegating, and coaching are easily delayed till the leader has time or surfaces their urgent tasks. True for you or others? 5. Style positioning mistake. Leaders communicate, organize, hand over, and give feedback in their own favored manner. If it works for me, it will work for them, is the mental model. That will leave the leader only partially successful, as followers could demand an entirely different style to be really successful. True for you or others? 6. Focus error. Fans expect and want their leaders to be well-intentioned, have well-thought-out strategies, be clear in direction, and know how the followers can best add to the vision. Too often, leaders are scattered, defocused, and unclear in what they want, and how they want tasks to be performed. True for you or others? Frequency mistake. Usually, the leader does not utilize the needed methods frequently enough to be effective. It is too little to really work and be successful with technique, to make a significant distinction for their staff members. It is like exercising just once a week to meet your objective of getting in shape. True for you or others? If more than 2 of the 7 really apply to you or a direct report, you are underperforming, and there's a lot of room for optimizing your influence. Chapter 7. The 7 Sneakiest Influential Techniques You Never Saw Coming. Early in life, when people want to influence us, they got away with flattery and conformity. By praising us and concurring with our opinions, they buttered us up and got what they really wanted. As we acquire experience with co-workers and bosses, marketers and advertisers, and family and friends, we end up being smarter. We recognize these thinly veiled ingratiation attempts, and they fall flat. Like a virus that alters after being reduced by the effects of the medicine, many individuals have responded by developing more sophisticated weapons of influence. Those stealth techniques are harder to identify, and if we're not familiar with them, we succumb to them. To learn about these methods, method researchers Itai Stern and James Westphal surveyed and spoken about thousands of members of the corporate elite. They asked CEOs, magnates, and board members at some of the world's biggest companies how they got away with ingratiating without making others suspicious of their intents. 7 constant techniques appeared. 1. Flaming flattery is very likely to make us awkward. Many executives confessed to prefacing compliments with disclaimers. I do not want to humiliate you, but I know you will not want me to say this, but you're going to hate me for saying this, but people get away with this tricky strategy for 2 reasons. First and foremost, it disguises the objective. If the aim was to ingratiate, we expect people to fixate on making us feel good, not bad. Second, it depicts us in favorable light. We think we are viewed as modest. 2. Framing flattery as advice-seeking. Executives reported coaching compliments in guidance requests. Instead of saying, I truly appreciate your success, one executive asked an influential colleague, how were you able to manage that strategy so effectively? This makes it seem just as if others are attempting to learn much from us, not ingratiate us. As Jack Herbert put it, we all admire the wisdom of people who come to us for advice. Let's face it, they have really taste. 3. Complimenting us to our good friends. When people compliment us directly, one supervisor noted, it's sort of obvious brown-nosing. Instead, if they say good features of us to our good friends, we will generally learn about it ultimately, and it will mean a lot more. When people speak glowingly about us behind our backs, we are often happily surprised that they were talking about us, not to mention applauding us. It also appears more genuine because they are putting their reputations on the line by telling others that they think highly of us. 4. Arguing before adhering. When people immediately agree with us, we begin to end up being skeptical of their intents. When they argue with us first and after that go along, it validates our beliefs that we are clever and logical. We also walk away with the sense that they are a discerning, critical audience who can be trusted. As one supervisor explained, if you keep saying, "Yes, boss, I concur, boss," it looks like drawing up. If you appear to challenge the boss a bit before yielding, "Okay, you've convinced me, asset," the arrangement appears more authentic. 5. Conforming to our viewpoint after learning about it from another person. Another way that people mask their ingratiation objectives is to collect independent information on our viewpoints, and after that show arrangement. In the words of a manager, if you learn the one in charge's viewpoint on a policy from talking to his good friend and then later in speaking to the one in charge, you raise the exact same viewpoint. It would look like more genuine. When this happens, we often have no clue that people were already familiar with our views. We wind up providing credit for agreeing with us on their own. If they reach the same conclusion as us, they should be pretty bright. 6. Backing our values before flattering or adhering. Executives also tucked ingratiation efforts into broader conversations about values. One manager defined it this way: "I've learned that a great way to start a discussion is to make some reference to something that's important to me personally, and that I have reason to really believe is essential to the other individual. At times, it's my spiritual conviction. In some cases, it's my commitment to environmental protection." When people establish that they share our values, we are less likely to question what they say next. 7. Referencing a common group before conforming. A variation of this theme includes highlighting shared subscription in a club or organization. Here's how one supervisor summed it up: "If I'm trying to influence someone, I may begin the discussion by pointing out a group or organization that I know we both come from. I think it helps build trust, so you can be more convincing." A plea for self-defense. Stern and Westphal found out that these challenging methods were most widely used by executives with upper-class backgrounds and experience in politics, sales, or law, and they paid off. Executives who camouflaged their ingratiation attempts were significantly more likely to land seats on boards of directors of significant businesses. What if we don't let them get away with it? Next time someone uses one of these methods on you, I hope you'll be more likely to recognize it and resist. Quote, "For as long as I can recall, I've been an easy mark," end quote, writes the psychologist Robert Cialdini in Influence. "I am at war with the exploiters. We all are." Chapter 8. In teaching others, every moment counts. The hype around student qualities, like grit, enthusiasm, psychological intelligence, or self-confidence, might make them believe that the traits a student brings into the class are decisive for the learning results the student will accomplish. But is it really true that such rather steady student attributes specify the learning result of a student? If that held true, to what level can an instructor's direction make a big difference for the motivation and learning of a student? In the past years, the public interest in changeable, improvable aspects of motivation has increased tremendously. Take, for instance, the research on student engagement, which has attracted increasing public interest and financing over the past years. This interest is in big part as a result of the fact that student engagement underlines the aspects of student motivation that could vary and can be possibly impacted by teachers. A recent shift in research techniques has made it possible to analyze the situation-specific and changing elements of inspiration more easily, which has sparked a wave of studies taking a look at the malleable elements of learning motivation and the possibilities for teachers to influence these changeable aspects. Those novel approaches to momentary motivation and their unexpected research findings are introduced in this post, measuring learning inspiration in the moment in which it happens. Preferably, we hope that a teacher knows which student is inspired and which students yet need more direction so they can comprehend the importance of an existing learning topic. However, few teachers have access to tools they can use to assess their students' inspiration and feelings, and even if such evaluations are available, they rarely catch the varying elements of inspiration that an instructor can impact with instructions. Even scientific studies that try to clarify time-sensitive behavior, like task choice, interest, or engagement, often rely on assessment of students' inspiration that only catch the rather steady parts instead of the flexible aspects. Nevertheless, smart device technology has made it progressively easy to capture the flexible elements of student motivation and learning-related feelings. In the INS 2015, smartphone applications and computer system software have been developed that enable researchers and instructors to ask their students in the middle of a lesson about their current motivation and emotions. For a long period of time, such approaches had been limited to scientists who were lucky enough to get a class set of assessments phones funded through a research grant. But current app developments make it now possible to ask students on their own phones about their short-term motivation. Some of these applications are available free of charge so that they can be used potentially by every instructor, presuming that all students can access an owned or an obtained mobile phone or computer at the time of the assessment. What degree of learning inspiration can be impacted by instructors, and what part remains steady over time? A current wave of studies using such in-the-moment assessments has revealed that a pretty big percentage of learning-related inspiration and emotions depends upon the attributes of learning situations and changes gradually. For example, the short-lived motivation study learned that in a university lecture in Germany, about one-third of the variation in the student's motivation was because of qualities of the learning circumstances. Another 30% was because of distinctions between learning topics, and another 30% was because of stable student characteristics. It's likely that the 60% of the inspiration that changes from situation to circumstance and from subject to topic could at least in part be affected by teaching strategies, while the part that stayed steadily across time is likely to be less flexible. Even forms of inspiration that are typically considered as rather steady include elements that can change from one circumstance to another, which gives us a clue what can be done to influence these forms of motivation. An example could be this. Temporary experiences of enthusiasm were strongly influenced by characteristics of circumstances. About 80% of the fluctuations observed in experiences of enthusiasm in the United States teenagers was because of qualities of situations. The remaining part, 20%, of passion stayed relatively stable, in part even across a period of approximately 2 years at the time of teenage years. Teenagers were likely to experience enthusiastic emotions in circumstances including romantic or sexual acts, playing musical instruments, or sports, while passive movement, such as listening to the radio, thinking, or watching television, rarely elicited passionate experiences. Likewise, a study analyzing feelings and motivation in Finnish college students found out that about 60 to 75% of variation in students' learning-associated emotions was because of situational influences, and 34 to 37% of the students' inspiration was due to the influences that changed from day to day, while 63 to 66% of the inspiration was because of steady individual qualities. These discoveries suggest that learning-related feelings and motivation include both steady and ever-changing elements, which gives rise to the hope that teachers might influence the varying parts with their teaching techniques. How can teachers influence short-lived feelings and inspirations in their classrooms? A first step is to get in-the-moment feedback about the students' emotions and inspirations. For an easy start, instructors can use the instantaneous polling tool, Surveys Everywhere, to ask students about their existing inspiration and emotions. Students can reply via web browsers or text messages, and answers can be seen and even showed to an audience in real time. In order to make the most out of the in-the-moment feedback, it is very important to have methods prepared. If you ask students about their existing interest, have an intervention ready in case they report feeling tired with the existing job. If you expect students to be restless, i.e. because of an upcoming test, prepare how to address this issue. Inspiration for such strategies can be found, for instance, at programs for social-emotional learning and in the research on inspiration interventions, like the utility value interventions. Students can also learn to track their emotions, to find out about their causes and effects, using tools such as the Moodometer app by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, or the Catch It app by the University of Liverpool. In the future, we hope that in-the-moment evaluations of students' feelings and inspirations become more frequent in classrooms, so that students receive inspirational support right in the moment when they most really need it and can benefit most from it. By implementing this individualized in-the-moment feedback into the individualized learning programs, a more personal, need-based support could be provided to students that are in tough circumstances. This has been Influence, the Science Behind Leadership and Creating Followers, written by Jonathan Phoenix, narrated by Alex Lancer, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Influence, the Psychology of Leadership and Good Management, written by Jonathan Phoenix, narrated by Alex Lancer, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Chapter 1. The Value of Good Impacts. Control over our lives is something all of us want. However, in a universe in which every little thing is mutually synergistic, none of us has outright power over anything except ourselves. And even over ourselves our control is indirect and partial only. Instead, what we all have in abundance is influence, the power of which appears to function linearly. The closer personally and physically others are to us, the greater our influence over them, and vice versa. Much more surprisingly, in contrast to our efforts to control, our efforts to influence don't need our conscious intent, which is precisely why our capability to influence others is so much more vital than our capability to control them. We are always exerting influence just by being who we are, saying what we say, and doing what we do. The only real choice we have in the matter is whether or not the influence we use is good or bad. Ending up being a good influencer. You never know who's watching you, and a person always is, whether your kid, your sibling, your spouse, your good friend, or some stranger in another automobile on the road. Feelings and inner life states are transferred like viruses along the vectors of our words and actions, even the quietest and smallest. Nothing can motivate us like someone else's good example. They are honestly scarce, but they're there if you look for them. Want to create value with your life? Become a very good influence. Stop and think. What better service can you provide another person besides being a good example to them? Not with mindful intent, which always seems contrived and has little power to motivate, but by just, oh, ironic word, becoming the examples you yourself want to see. As I wrote in a previous post, How to Communicate with Your Life, when you have actually become something, others see it in almost every little thing you do. Avoiding bad impacts. Life is a continuous battle to maintain a high life condition. In medical school, we were taught that one way to recognize a patient is depressed is by examining our own mood once we're completed engaging with them. If we feel depressed ourselves, a great chance exists they are too. A principle of Nichiren Buddhism, the oneness of life and its environment, addresses this phenomenon. Our own inner life state finds itself mirrored in or mirrored by our environment. To put it simply, everyone's life condition tends to the average of those around them. If I am up and you're down, we will each tend to pull each other towards our own inner states, usually both approaching the mean between them. Many people have incredibly resilient life conditions that are like rigid magnets, pulling others up or down powerfully without tending to move much themselves under the influence of the life conditions of others. While we may all aspire to have that strength, to the positive, clearly, most of us have not achieved it. Others are still able to take out of most of us varying positive or negative qualities. Our kids may pull our smart protectors or fed-up disciplinarians. Our colleagues may pull out inspiring leaders or grumbling gossips. There are people who are simply poisonous, complaining continuously, gossiping mercilessly, and even purposefully screwing up others. On days we are strong enough not only to avoid being pulled into similar patterns of conduct, but also help them keep from such negative habits also, we can act as good impacts over them. On days we are weaker ourselves, and for this reason more susceptible to negative influences, we should keep away from such people as best we can. It's rather simple when we are feeling low to spiral even lower under the influence of someone else's negativity. Converting bad impacts into excellent ones. This is what all of us truly want to do, both for ourselves and others. The more good impacts with which we surround ourselves, the happier we'll be. The more people we transform into good impacts by our own good influence, the more value we will have created, which will also add to our happiness. Yet transforming a person from a bad influence into a good one is among the hardest of tasks. Changing somebody's standard approach to life from negative to positive isn't very likely something any someone has the power to do. At the very least, not regularly. The only way, it seems to me, to turn a bad influence into a great one is by regularly being an effective good influence yourself, which obviously requires you to challenge your own negativity and continuously win over it, and that is the hardest of jobs, and also the most rewarding. I can think of no better epitaph than, "He helped others to better themselves." If that is what they end up saying about me, I'm going to have had the ability to consider my life a success. It is certainly what I'm going to say about my dad. Chapter 2. How influencers use the psychology of covert content. Burly, greatly bearded, and permanently dressed up in building gear, you may expect to see Omar holding a hammer rather than an iPhone. And yet his Instagram is more active than the average high schooler. His photos turn up with stunning frequency. On a construction site, drinking coffee, back on a construction site again. In many ways, he is the reverse of a social media influencer. In one post, he specifics how he began his account just to playfully compete with his too cool teenage daughter. He lists lifestyle influencer on his profile, sardonically. However, to the tune of nearly 500,000 followers, Omar, at Just a Construction Guy, is an Instagram experience and another citizen in the world of micro-celebrities. The only problem is that Omar, as the internet grew to know and really love him, is a total fabrication. The account is the creation of Mike McKim, the owner of Austin's Cuvée Coffee. Together with Bandolier Media, they created Omar in the image of the brand name, a blue-collar and hard-working anti-influencer. The man featured in the posts was compensated for the photo shoots, but had no autonomy over the account itself. And while some of Omar's posts include other hashtags to poke fun at influencers, the developer brand name, at Cuvée Coffee, is also specifically tagged in several posts on the page. Ironically, he isn't the self-professed reverse of influencer marketing, but rather the formation of it. What to make from Omar? There's a lot that can be said. Was he real in the sense that people thought he was real and found employment in following his life? Was he real in the sense that he represented a real idea? What is Omar? In a word, Omar is a technique. He is a perfect personification of a new age of creating, mining, and monetizing social influence, and he's just the start. Influencer marketing, a quick 2-year history. To comprehend how we got to Omar, we have to go back in time to 2017, eons ago in the breakneck speed of the influencer world. Influencer marketing was developed and the number of micro-celebrities was growing rapidly. All this growth brought attention from regulators, most anxious about its potential customers when the Federal Trade Commission began watching influencers' practices more carefully. The FTC soon found that almost 93% of influencers are not properly revealing their recommendations, and in April they started officially breaking down serving notices to both brand names and influencers. When these guidelines hit the fan, many thought this was the beginning of the end. In retrospection, it represented the beginning of a new period. With the FTC keeping a close watch, content that directly goes over the product or even uses it too easily could excite suspicion. Now the influencers had an incentive to be sneaky, to give the brand exposure without looking like they're attempting to give the brand direct exposure. If Jay-Z and Beyoncé go on a trip and publish a picture with a Corona bottle in the background of the shot, we may never know if it's a paid post or Corona just happened to be fortunate enough to be in the area and get free exposure. The content has the exact same impact on the FTC as it does on the masses. You can't tell what is real and what is an advertisement. The age of concealed content was born. The science of direct exposure. You may be asking yourself, well, if the influencer is not actually promoting the product in their picture, hell, some look like they do not even know it exists, how can this potentially be handy to the brand name? Here's where the neuromarketing perspective comes in. Even if the influencer is not actively promoting the product, it still has a major effect. In fact, the impact is actually improved, not hindered, if we don't think it is an explicit advertisement. Marketing works best when you don't know you are being marketed to. This is the neuroscience of direct exposure. Everything starts with familiarity. As a general rule, we human beings like things that are familiar. If something seems familiar to us, it means we've seen it previously, which means it probably is not deadly. From the perspective of development, non-life-threatening is unquestionably good. Behavioral psychologists and neuroscientists call this the mere exposure effect. All else being equal, the more we expose to something, the more we like it. And fascinatingly, this preference for the familiar appears to run totally outside your awareness. In one experiment, researchers showed English-speaking participants a series of different Chinese characters. No task, just look at them and pay attention. Later on, participants were asked to accurately guess what each character meant. Just remember, the individuals knew zero Chinese. From their perspective, they were just guessing random words. Pet dog, cup, good-looking, soccer. Here's the thing, the guesses weren't random. If they had seen the character before, even quickly, they were far more very likely to assume the word was related to something positive, like happiness and love, regardless of not having any idea what they actually meant. Those results persisted despite the fact that none of the individuals remembered having actually seen the characters before. Over 200 research studies across a wide range of domains have reproduced the mere direct exposure impact, finding you like things the more you are exposed to them. Comparable findings have been noted in animals too, and even in developing chicks still in the egg. Tones of 2 different frequencies were played to 2 groups of fertile chicken eggs. At birth, the chicks chose the tone they had formerly heard. And here's the kicker. Research has discovered that the influence is more pronounced when the exposure is implicit. If we don't consciously know we're seeing an advertisement for Corona, but it appears in the background of several posts we have stumbled upon, we like it even more. This has huge implications for customer psychology and eventually your conduct. Direct exposure is a lot more powerful when you do not consciously know you are being exposed to a product. Think about it. When you know a commercial is, well, an industrial, the message loses power. You know you are being sold to, and it feels inauthentic. We closed down our openness and turn on our critical thinking, which is kryptonite to the advertising brand name. The period of social influencers has assembled on this function naturally, perhaps by accident. Micro-celebrities and influencers profit from the brain's preference for incorporated, subtle, direct exposure. As YouTube influencer Anwar Jawabi just recently told Forbes, if the content isn't amusing or if it feels like a 100% scripted ad, then audiences aren't going to select that up. I did a video with Steph Curry for Brita, and it was really organic and fun. In my mind, I am creating a regular video with an item rather than creating an advertisement. From the perspective of influencers, concealed content is a win-win. It is an ideal strategy for providing value to brands who pay them without attracting unwanted attention from regulators. And with each new creative, integrated piece of content, the line between organic content and top-quality content continues to blur together with an objective way to control it. The arms race of covert content. Social media has galvanized digital marketing like no other medium before it. No surprise there. The influencer branch of the social networks tree has further obscured the lines between marketing and organic content, and this is the reason that the sway of influencers works out beyond direct recommendations. Truth be told, the less direct an endorsement, the more prominent it could be. Driven maybe ironically by regulation, the industry is becoming more concealed and, in turn, more reliable. Some of the best marketing is done without us ever understanding we're being marketed to, and in fact, it works simply because we don't know we're being marketed to. With a renewed focus on covert content, the influencer economy has continued to grow and is expected to be a $15 billion market by 2022. And if more individualized face marketing strategies are adopted, these patterns might even speed up. But users aren't just passively taking this in, they're starting to sensible up to these methods. You can only see the bathroom selfie with a branded shampoo in the background so many times before you end up being a little suspicious. So, as customers catch on, influencers are needing to end up being more and more creative about integrating their content in a covert way that still feels genuine. The neuromarketing arms race is on, an escalating fight between the consciousness of the customer and the creativity of the influencer. Chapter 3. How Genes Influence Joy. From curly hair to a shy character, there is a lot we acquire from our parents or caretakers. However, is it possible that our genes can also influence our well-being? According to science, yes. Happiness, certainly, has a heritable element. It's a finding that's unexpected and not unexpected at the same time. It's surprising just because of our culturally sanctioned convictions that with our choices, thoughts, and conducts, we have the last word on how well we operate in our lives, not our circumstances. But it is also not unexpected because if our genes play a part in forming who we are in the world, they will also have a say in how we go after and find happiness. Professor Meike Bartels, a leading academic in the field of genes, uses twin and DNA research studies to check out the role of genes in well-being. Because twins share their hereditary material, any difference in their wellness should be because of ecological impacts, says Dr. Bartels, making twin studies a powerful tool in understanding the genes' happiness interplay. The primary takeaway from Dr. Bartels' research is that we're all different and a part of our distinctions comes from our genes. Appreciating these differences, whether in research or in our everyday choices, would produce a much better world. Here are 8 questions on how genes influence happiness with Dr. Bartels. What does it mean to say that wellness is partially heritable? It means that a part of the distinction between individuals' well-being is represented by genetic differences. Most people may inherit genes that put them in advantageous or favorable positions. Genes can also offer certain vulnerabilities, but even if you inherit genes that make you vulnerable to depression, you don't need to be depressed. Likewise, you might have a really high hereditary predisposition for well-being, but it's not the end point. The environment is also really important. What has a higher influence on our happiness, genes or environment? According to the basic model, 40% of distinctions between people in their well-being are accounted for by hereditary differences, while the rest 60% of differences are represented by environmental influences. Still, this model presumes that there's no interplay between genes and the environment. In reality, genes interact with the environment in a variety of ways. For example, some people could be extremely sensitive to sunlight and get sunburned quickly, while others could not. The differences in the sensitivity to sunshine are based on the coloring of the skin, which is based on the genotype. Another example of this gene-environment interplay is how our genes drive our environmental exposure. If you are an extrovert, for instance, you probably enjoy spots with lots of people. What genes make you more vulnerable to joy? There are different human attributes that appear to overlap in a hereditary predisposition for happiness, and that includes optimism, strength, and cognitive styles. We have determined 300 areas in the human genome that belong to differences in well-being. Together, these clarify only 2% of the distinctions between people. There are still many more unidentified genetic results. Can you break your genes' personality and learn to be happy? Yes, to a certain degree. An example could be this. If you were to rate your life on a scale from 0 to 10, and based upon your family background and genes, consider your life to be a 4, you could raise it to a 5 or 6 if you find the right intervention. But your score will most likely never ever increase to an 8 or above. It's not easy to jump on the scale. Why are some people happier than others, even when they find themselves in comparable scenarios? It's much easier to comprehend this when we draw a parallel with exercise. If you are a non-exerciser, with the right training and support, you could become a person who exercises more or less regularly. However, you're going to likely never end up being a dedicated marathon runner, of course with exceptions. Or if you happen to be training with a group, even with the same program, people will advance at different rates. Some will make huge dives in their physical abilities, while others will show little progress. The same is true for joy and well-being. It takes a very long time to change routines and conduct, so complete changes from a low score to a high score are not likely. Furthermore, doing the exact same thing will work for some and not for others. It is also why some people are happier than others, even if they find themselves in comparable circumstances. All of this variation is due partly to our genetic predisposition, and every little thing that includes human qualities like routines, character, general attitude toward life, all has a hereditary part. How can we use the genes environment interplay for our benefit? I think in the future we will have the ability to have our own individualized gene scores for wellness that can help find the right interventions for us. For example, if you have a high hereditary predisposition for happiness, but you do not feel well, or you are having depressive symptoms, rather than working on your symptoms through therapy or medication, we could intervene on increasing your well-being. This can be done using different techniques, such as working on your strengths, or learning to be more optimistic. Nevertheless, if we know that you have a low hereditary predisposition for joy, then it's probably not properly to go. What does genetics research teach us about leading happier lives? We should realize that the biological differences between us mean that there is no golden rule or protocol to make everyone happy. For each person, it will be a product of their genes and environment. You must figure out for yourself in what situations and environments you feel well. That is simpler said than done. We are a complicated society, and to be entirely sincere with yourself about what makes you happy may take a lifetime. This is one reason that older people are generally happier. To start with, they are less vulnerable to what the environment says. Second of all, they have sorted out what makes them happy. It's an optimistic message, provided that people have the chance and bravery to try to find their own interventions. At some point, people know what makes them happy, but that does not mean that they are able to change their lives accordingly. In your viewpoint, what's the key to leading a very happy life? I think there are 2 secrets. 1. Learn more about yourself, and 2. Be essential for at least someone in the world. Whether you have a huge group of good friends or just someone who you feel connected to, you should matter to, at the very least, somebody in the world. Chapter 4. The main 6 steps towards conscious leadership. What does an ideal leader look like? Wise, formidable, an incredible listener, the soul of a monk with the action orientation of a superhero? Phew, that seems like a lot of pressure. While these virtues are terrific, it can be hard to envision what such lofty objectives look like every day. So how then does someone end up being a more ideal leader? What are some real-world techniques you could use tomorrow to make a greater effect? What is mindful leadership? For this short article, I turned to a skilled expert who provided me a working meaning. Conscious leadership means meeting the needs of yourself, your constituents, and your company with presence, emotional flexibility, interest, and openness to new perspectives. Conscious leadership has been connected with improved focus, higher quality relationships, creativity, and innovation. There are many science-backed ways that mindfulness can improve your ability to lead. 6 steps towards mindful management. Truly skillful leaders are always on the lookout for effective ways to improve themselves and their companies. Pick 1 or 2 of the following methods, try them for a full week, and record how effective they were for you. I would suggest putting multiple reminders on your iPhone to keep up with your practice. Make each method into a formal goal and plan to use it every day. It's necessary to keep the strategy at the top of your mind, so you actually do the work throughout the week. 1. Listen, not just to respond, but to understand. Quote, "Many people do not listen with the intent to comprehend. They listen with the intent to respond." End quote. Stephen R. Covey. We're all guilty of it. We smile and nod at the person speaking. We even get the essence of what they're saying. Nonetheless, instead of fully paying attention, we are busy preparing our own brilliantly hilarious responses. It is a natural propensity, but when our attention is divided, we miss out on many communicative signals. People typically say far more with their nonverbal communication, facial expressions, and singing tone than with their actual words. In some cases, when somebody says, "I'm fine," what they actually want is for you to ask more deeply. Good leaders bear in mind these hints. They are present, attentive, and completely engaged with the person speaking. Conscious listening is a fantastic way to enhance the quality of your discussions. It makes sure that other people feel heard and acknowledged. For this technique, the objective is to approach your discussions with full attention and interest. Don't be on your phone when a person is speaking to you. Look them in the eye and keep your focus on what they are saying. Notice when someone's furrowed eyebrows, crossed arms, and irritated voice signal their true feelings. Take in the totality of the speaker's communication with the intent to understand. Then respond with proper kindness and compassion. Practice mindfully listening to people for a full week and take notice of instances where it helped you to communicate more effectively. Do not be shocked if your relationships start to improve and you feel more connected. Added benefit. Research suggests that being present is a fundamental element of charisma and persuasion. Attention is an important commodity in the modern-day world, and it's appealing when somebody offers you their full attention. This conscious listening practice can help you form higher quality relationships and could even help your career. 2. Practice self-care. Quote, "Self-care is never a selfish act. It is simply good stewardship. Any time we can listen to true self and give the care it requires, we do it not only for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we touch." End quote. Parker Palmer. Good leaders make every effort to do right by their constituents. They care and they want to serve the greater good. Sadly, this altruistic drive can lead people to overschedule and overextend themselves. Leaders typically say yes to helping everybody, neglect their own well-being, and end up burning themselves out. Yet, it is impossible to pour from an empty cup. You can't optimally take care of others if you do not take care of yourself first. Being mindful of helping yourself can actually be a great act of empathy for others. For this technique, pay close attention to your own sense of well-being for a full week. Take notification when you're exhausting yourself trying to help others, and adjust accordingly. Decide that you will say no when you really need to preserve energy. Actually take one of your ill days and unwind. Exercise, hang out with friends, participate in a breathing practice, fully separate from work when you are not there. Keep your own health and happiness in mind so you can better support those around you. You may not have the ability to take a longer lunch break or do yoga after work, but even little efforts to renew will build resilience. Practice self-care where you can, and you might find that you have more energy to commit to your responsibilities as a leader. 3. Technique problems with a beginner's mind. Quote, "In the newbie's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the specialist's, there are few." End quote. Roshi. Often when we get to be masterful in a skill, we become myopic about best practices. We resort to muscle memory and get stuck in old patterns of problem solving. Rather than thinking about every choice, we do as we have always done, potentially at the expense of a better resolution. "Let's get a fresh set of eyes on this" is more than a hackneyed brainstorming tactic. It is actually a tested method to find new and creative options. When we approach a circumstance with a novice's frame of mind, we open ourselves up to innovation. For this strategy, technique problems with more of a newbie's mind. Imagine for a moment that you know very little or nothing about a problem or subject. Become curious, ask more questions, and open yourself up to new possibilities. Consider bringing someone in from a completely different department, or getting a diverse group of people together to discuss an issue. You could not transform the wheel, but development happens when people shake off old paradigms and open to new ways of doing things. Practice deliberately approaching circumstances as a newbie and see what a fresh perspective can add to the conversation. 4. Shift from "what if" to "what is." Quote, "There are those that are always anticipating trouble, and in this way they manage to enjoy many sorrows that never really happened to them." End quote. Josh Billings. This is an unbelievable technique to get present and reduce the effects of anxious rumination. I would suggest checking out Corey's video explanation of the subject here, but I'm going to also clarify how this strategy works. Development has hardwired our brains for survival, and one way our brains keep us alive is by getting us to contemplate what might go wrong, what if thinking. We constantly think things like, what if I lose my job? What if I get sick? Or how will I make it through if that huge earthquake happens tomorrow? These thoughts are natural and can be efficient in helping us prepare for the future. Oftentimes, though, our minds get trapped considering negative results. We can make ourselves ill over all the what-ifs. And the kicker? Most of our doomsday scenarios never even happen. Mindfulness offers some help in this area. By tuning into our thoughts and noticing disastrous thinking, we end up being able to direct our attention to more efficient topics. This activity is used to help people with anxiety attacks as well. For this technique, the objective is to change what-if thoughts into what-is thoughts. Instead of ruminating on potentially negative solutions, we want to direct our thoughts to what is around us at this moment. Stop to really appreciate that you are very likely in a safe and hospitable environment. If you have a roofing over your head and there are no immediate threats, things are probably working out enough. Stay present in your environment instead of wandering off into negative hypotheticals. Take note of the impacts of this strategy on your well-being. Contemplating apocalyptic scenarios can be efficient for our planning, but it typically leaves us feeling anxious and tired. Instead of fixating on what ifs, bring your attention to what is in front of you. Focus on your present experience, and more often than not, you'll feel more relaxed and able to handle your circumstance. 5. Scan your body. Quote, "It is fantastic how many hints and guides and instincts for living come to the sensitive individual who has ears to hear what his body is saying." End quote. Rollo May. Research suggests that we spend much of our life on autopilot, and it's not uncommon to feel restless or negative without seeing the effects of these emotions on our behavior. It's times like these that it can be useful to stop and pay attention to our bodies. When we stop briefly and guide our consciousness to our posture, heart rate, breathing patterns, and muscular tension, we could understand that we are in an angry or disappointed emotion. When we notice the physical signs of anger and aggravation, we give ourselves the gift of space. Rather than just reacting in an emotionally charged state, we may choose to take an hour to relax or consider a problem more deeply. Instead of a hot-tempered reaction, we may be sorry for it. We can react with greater intentionality and attain better results. For this strategy, take part in body scans as you go about your day. At the very least 3 times a day, stop and notice your breath, heart rate, and degree of physical convenience. Ask what these signals mean for your psychological mindset. Ask yourself if your present state is the most efficient for your circumstance. Maybe take a minute to relax or accelerate your energy, depending on your current set of circumstances. Body scanning is a staple in the mindfulness community. As a matter of fact, one of the Buddha's first recommendations was to develop a greater awareness of the body. It helps us comprehend the effects of our situation on ourselves and how we behave. It's a proven means of getting off autopilot, and it's a crucial tool in a mindful leader's repertoire. Added benefit: tuning into your body can help you forecast the temperament of a strong leader. Effective people stand straight, use up space, and maintain relaxed body language. Intentionally handling your body can convince those around you to feel safe and communicate that you have the circumstance under control. 6. Notice judgments and predispositions. Quote, "Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our reaction. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." End quote. Viktor Frankl. It's a natural propensity to make snap judgments about everything around us. Almost automatically, thoughts just pop into our heads. We think things like, "That meeting was pointless," and "I can't actually believe Jim drank all of the coffee. He's so selfish." Seriously, listen to your mental chatter for several hours, and you'll notice an unyielding flow of judgments and evaluations. This isn't always a bad thing. A number of the judgments are efficient, and many of our regular assessments are there for a good reason. However, there are many occasions when these reactive assessments aren't true or are polluted by our biases. The good news is, mindfulness can help us tune into our judgments and biases so that we could show greater objectivity. Non-judgmental consciousness is an important part of a correct mindfulness practice. It allows us to end up being more mindful of our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, without getting hung up on whether they're good or bad, right or wrong. By making ourselves knowledgeable about our experience, we become more able to take our judgments with a grain of salt. When we notice a belief like, "Jim's a selfish coffee fiend," we create space to assess if the statement is true, incorrect, or just an item of the fact that we never actually liked Jim. It's simple to carry predispositions about people or how things should be done, but our preconceived notions can be limiting. Being mindful of our judgments permits us to actually think and react intentionally, rather than just reacting. For this strategy, we want to become more familiar with our snap judgments and predispositions. Keep your attention on how you're evaluating what goes on around you. Try journaling at 3 pre-programmed times during the day about some of the automatic judgments you've noticed. This develops a higher sensitivity to all those evaluative thoughts. which produces opportunities to alter detrimental assessments. This awareness of our knee-jerk evaluations is critical to being a great leader. Instead of instantly writing off ideas or people, this practice helps us consider more alternatives on an even keel. Stopping to examine our automated reactions can result in enhanced imagination, problem-solving, and development. Chapter 5: The 4 Vital Steps to Develop Genuine Management. We live in a high-speed, complex, and paradoxical world. High-performance management requires a method that meets today's worldwide difficulties. Today, it's less about finding solutions and more about creating new patterns. It's less about redistribution of abilities and more about fostering creative processes. It's less about competition and more about partnership. To meet the obstacles of this millennia, our present demands a new kind of leadership. The meaning of leadership as the capability to influence is still a valid definition. However, the how of leadership needs to be re-engineered. Management as a discussion. The intertwinement of management with conversation at first can appear counterintuitive. Actually, leadership has been usually translated with the charming capability to utter commands that are carried out by followers. The idea of discussion suggests a different mindset and shows the emerging reality of organizations, which have less and less hierarchical organizations, and increasingly more a network-like configuration. In fact, conversation presupposes a casual quality. It refers to an exchange of ideas. It suggests an irreversible feedback and points to a system of reciprocity. The 4E management. Describing these qualities in seminars and trainings, I present the 4E leadership. The first E stays for explore. To obtain self-awareness is essential to get the capacity for deep listening, which is a fundamental element of great and efficient discussions. To be aware of the laws and actually beliefs that govern our life, of the framework that give meaning to our experience, of the shadows that stop us to express our full potential, is a required initial step to produce and to nourish conversations with confidence. The second E remains for encounter. There is no discussion without a prior encounter. An encounter needs the capability to leave a person's own comfort zone and to be moved by curiosity. It demands to level yourself with the other. There's no genuine encounter till you are looking down to the other. The third E remains for empathize. To understand is a fundamental emotional intelligence ability. There is no understanding, and understanding without empathy. It is the capability to see and to comprehend the experience, the ideas and the values of the other, practically to the point of identification. It recognizes the other's existence and legitimizes the other's ideas. The acquisition of this skill is needed for a versatile and creative leadership. The fourth E stays for engage. Once a leader has empathized with the other, the leader can engage the other by soliciting ideas, contributions, and commitments. By engaging the other, a leader can cultivate in his own organization the capacity for imagination and creativeness, which can lead to innovative options. By engaging the other, a leader is able to generate a menu of alternatives and solutions. Developing abilities, according to the 4E management, individuals will have the ability to navigate effectively and with confidence our high-speed, complicated, and paradoxical world. Whether you happen to be a parent or caretaker, an instructor, a student, a professional, a manager, or a top executive. This has been Influence: The Psychology of Leadership and Good Management, written by Jonathan Phoenix, narrated by Alex Lancer, copyright 2020, all rights reserved.